The image of the samurai has long transcended the simple definition of warrior. Over the centuries, this figure transformed into a profound cultural archetype, embodying the quintessential traits of the Japanese national character. Within this image, a fascinating paradox emerged. Unbreakable courage, unwavering devotion to duty, ironclad discipline, and, at the same time, a refined appreciation for beauty. The mere mention of samurai conjures a kaleidoscope of images, from their masterful swordsmanship and stern ascetic philosophy to the austere, functional beauty of their armor and weaponry. Originating more than 1,000 years ago as a military class dedicated to service, the samurai for many centuries were the very force that shaped the destiny of the Japanese nation. They were not merely the swords of their lords, but also their minds and wills, serving as administrators, diplomats, mentors to the younger generation, and even philosophers who sculpted the ethical norms of their era. Through the fires of internecine wars, the labyrinthine plots of court intrigues, and periods of profound social upheaval, these warriors gradually evolved into a ruling elite, holding the reins of power in the country until the 19th century. Yet, their true strength lay not only in the steel of their blades, but also in the unwavering integrity of their moral code. The warrior's path was one of honor, absolute loyalty, and personal dignity, which at crucial moments demanded conscious and complete self-sacrifice. It is no wonder, then, that the samurai legacy continues to captivate researchers from across the globe even today. For historians, it offers a crucial key to profoundly understanding the intricate mechanisms of Japanese societal development and its unique culture. For philosophers, it serves as an inexhaustible arena for contemplating the eternal categories of duty, honor, and the meaning of death. For directors and writers, their dramatic destinies provide an endless wellspring of inspiration. Thanks to this, the world knows far more about the samurai than just dry facts about military campaigns. Their culture is a complex world, replete with symbolism, rigorous rituals, and a striking unity of battlefield ruthlessness and a delicate appreciation for beauty in peaceful life. The origins of the samurai can be traced back to the refined yet contradictory Heian period, spanning from the late 8th to the 12th century. This was an era marking the zenith of classical Japanese culture. The imperial court and the high aristocracy residing in the capital of Heian-kyo, which we know today as Kyoto, were entirely engrossed in the world of high art. Their lives were a tapestry of exquisite amusements, poetic tournaments, artistic pursuits, and intricate court intrigues. However, while literature, painting, and calligraphy flourished in the capital, entirely different processes were unfolding beyond this refined world. The burden of governing vast provinces and organizing their defense increasingly fell upon the shoulders of the local nobility. It was within this environment, far removed from the luxurious languor of the capital, that conditions for the emergence of a new social group began to form. A need for armed retainers, samurai, a term literally translating to one who serves or attendant, emerged from within the aristocracy itself. Their task was to protect their lords, accompany them on journeys, and maintain order. Thus, from practical necessity, a force was born that was one day destined to redraw the power map of the entire country, even though at that time no one could have imagined that these servants were on the cusp of becoming masters. With each passing decade, the central government's grip weakened, and the imperial court increasingly resembled an exquisite but isolated island. The high aristocracy, fully engrossed in palace ceremonies, poetic contests, and calligraphic exercises, willingly ceded control over distant regions. Meanwhile, in the provinces, within this power vacuum, powerful noble families rapidly gained strength, possessing vast landholdings and maintaining their own armed contingents of loyal warriors. Actual power in the provinces shifted into the hands of mighty regional clans, among which the Fujiwara, Taira, and Minamoto particularly stood out, each forging its own distinct path to the pinnacle. The Fujiwara clan, for many centuries, masterfully spun a web of influence directly within the corridors of the imperial palace. Its members held key government positions and, more crucially, forged dynastic marriages with members of the imperial family, effectively manipulating the monarch's actions through these familial ties. Their weapons were not swords, but rather astute diplomacy and political intrigue. The Taira and Minamoto clans, however, chose a completely different strategy. Both descended from collateral branches of the imperial lineage. They were thus barred from ascending to the throne. The Taira clan solidified its power in western Japan, controlling the rich lands surrounding the Sato Inland Sea. Its leaders pursued power by skillfully combining military superiority with political alliances at court, which allowed them to secure important governmental posts. The Minamoto clan, by contrast, established its stronghold in the eastern part of the country, subduing the vast Kanto region. Their might rested almost exclusively on military strength and the unwavering loyalty of their numerous vassals, for whom serving their lord was the highest purpose in life. Minamoto representatives rarely sought imperial favor, preferring to assert their authority through direct military control over the lands. Over time, the rivalry between these two great warrior houses became inevitable. Possessing formidable armies and boundless ambitions, the Taira and Minamoto were bound to clash in a struggle for land and influence over the emperor. This profound antagonism would later escalate into bloody wars that would forever alter Japan's political landscape. Against the backdrop of waning imperial authority, new centers of power were forming in the provinces, founded not on noble lineage, but on the number of loyal swords. Facing constant threats, from bandit raids and peasant revolts to aggression from neighboring territories, local aristocrats began to form their own armed retinues. These very units became the cradle of the future samurai class, giving rise not merely to an increase in regional autonomy, but to the birth of an entirely new warrior culture, built on principles of personal loyalty, rigorous discipline, and strong social bonds. Initially, such retinues comprised free landowners, descendants of minor nobility, and experienced warriors capable of providing their own horse and equipment. Service in these units opened pathways to elevated status, especially when a warrior was granted land to manage. Many of them became estate managers, or jito, whose responsibilities included collecting taxes, overseeing harvests, and ensuring security within their assigned territory. Powerful patrons, whether mighty clans, monasteries, or court nobility, granted warriors vast estates to manage, lands that were thereby removed from central administrative control. This not only provided warriors with a stable economic base, but also vastly enhanced their loyalty to their lord. In this early period, the warrior's appearance was defined less by the blade of a sword and more by the mastery of the bow. The bow, not the artist's brush, became the era's primary instrument, and on its string already trembled the tension of impending battles destined to forever change the face of Japan. The art of mounted archery, meticulously honed by warriors in ritual competitions and ceremonial hunts, was not merely a combat skill. It was a vivid demonstration of noble lineage and supreme training. Impeccable mastery of the bow served as an elite hallmark, while the sword, though an integral part of their weaponry, was considered a weapon of last resort, a symbol of desperate resolve and personal valor in close-quarters combat. It was during this period that distinct styles of wearing and adorning weapons began to emerge, emphasizing a warrior's allegiance to a specific clan and local martial tradition. As regional clans strengthened, service in their retinues transformed from a personal choice into a hereditary duty. The bond between a warrior and his lord was cemented by an oath of fealty and a system of mutual obligations. The lord acted as a protector of his vassals' interests, granting them lands, privileges, titles, and the right to act on his behalf. In return, the vassal was obligated to maintain order within his assigned territory, answer the call to war at a moment's notice, and safeguard the liege's ancestral domains. These ties were deeply personal, almost familial, and founded on trust, years of proven service, and the impeccable reputation of both parties. It was then that the foundation was laid for what would later become the classic structure of feudal Japan. The shift in emphasis within the elite inevitably rippled through the cultural life of society. While previously universal respect was garnered by those who excelled in poetry, music, and refined manners, now authority was earned by those who could physically hold the borders of their domains, raise loyal warriors, and skillfully command them in battle. In the provinces, a new nobility asserted itself, an aristocracy of the sword whose influence was won not by birthright, but through personal strength, mastery, and exceptional organizational talents. The warrior of that era was expected not only to fight, but also to oversee the condition of fields, ensure tax collection, maintain order in villages, and resolve local conflicts. Thus, the early samurai combined the qualities of a soldier, administrator, and mentor. Moreover, he wielded virtually unlimited power over his subordinates. Peasants were viewed as part of the economic mechanism, a useful but entirely dependent force from whom unquestioning obedience was demanded. A samurai could brutally punish a peasant for the slightest transgression. Non-payment of taxes, disobedience, insolence, or even a gesture that could be interpreted as disrespect. Surviving chronicles and land registries mention instances where a peasant was put to death for failing to bow to a passing horseman or daring to contradict a manager in a dispute over the size of taxes. Such events were not considered abuses of power, rather they were seen as a natural part of the established order. By demonstrating absolute control over his subjects, the samurai reinforced the reputation of his clan and his lord. By the close of the 12th century, tensions between the nation's most powerful clans reached a boiling point. For decades, the Taira and Minamoto had been meticulously amassing power, expanding their armies, forging alliances, and vying for influence within the imperial court. Their fierce rivalry for supreme authority erupted into a full-scale armed conflict, etched into the annals of history as the Genpei War. This clash, which swept across nearly the entire breadth of Japan, marked a profound turning point, forever dividing the era of court aristocracy from the age of the warrior class. For the first time in the nation's chronicles, it was the samurai, not the manipulative court schemers, who determined the destiny of the realm. The official catalyst for the war, however, was a dispute over imperial succession. And while the struggle ostensibly centered on installing a favored candidate on the throne, the true stakes in this high-stakes game were immeasurably greater, the very future of Japan itself. By the year 1179, the Taira clan, steered by its patriarch Kiyomori, had ascended to the zenith of its power, effectively usurping control of the imperial court's levers of authority. By placing his own grandson, the young Antoku, upon the chrysanthemum throne, Kiyomori transformed himself into a shadowy regent, holding the entirety of true power firmly within his grasp. Such a brazen ascent by a single lineage inevitably bred a deep-seated yet all-consuming resentment among the ancient aristocracy and rival clans, especially within the ranks of their perennial adversaries, the Minamoto house. The aristocracy's patience finally wore thin in early 1180, when Prince Mochihito, having secured the backing of Minamoto Yorimasa, openly issued a call to arms to overthrow the Taira dictatorship and restore legitimate order within the imperial family. This initial rebellion, however, was doomed from the outset. Barely igniting, it was almost instantaneously crushed, and the prince himself fell during the retreat. Minamoto Yorimasa, finding himself encircled by enemy forces within a temple compound, chose a path that would forever etch his name into the annals of history. Refusing the dishonor of capture, he performed the ritual disembowelment, an act that stands as the first documented instance of seppuku. This was no mere death. It was a deliberate and profound demonstration of warrior honor, transforming his defeat into a moral triumph and setting the standard for a dignified exit from life for the entire samurai class. Despite the failure of this initial uprising, it served as the very spark that ignited the flames of full-scale civil war. The banner of resistance was seized by Minamoto Yoritomo, a scion of a collateral branch of the clan who had, until this moment, been living in exile in the remote province of Izu. It was there, far from the machinations of the capital, that he methodically began to forge the bedrock of his future authority, gathering loyal followers, organizing an army, and constructing his own administrative system, wholly independent of the court. His call resonated deeply across the eastern regions of the country. Not only his father's old vassals flocked to Yoritomo, but also new forces disgruntled by the Taira's hegemony, powerful Buddhist monasteries and independent landowners alike. The small town of Kamakura transformed into the epicenter of this burgeoning movement, becoming the nascent seed of a future military government, the shogunate. The military conflict soon engulfed the entirety of Japan, from the coastal plains of the Seto Inland Sea to the rugged mountain passes of the north. Battles were waged with unprecedented brutality, leaving behind a trail of ruined settlements and claiming thousands of lives on both sides. A pivotal figure in this sanguinary theater of war was Minamoto Yoshitsune, Yoritomo's younger brother, whose strategic brilliance and personal valor became the stuff of legend. His genius was fully unleashed in the year 1184 during the Battle of Ichinotani. Yoshitsune achieved the unthinkable. He led his forces around enemy fortifications, traversing virtually impassable mountain slopes and crashing down upon the Taira army from an utterly unexpected direction. This sudden and brilliantly executed maneuver yielded a devastating effect. The Taira forces, engulfed in panic, were utterly routed and sent scattering, losing many of their commanders. The culmination of this protracted feud arrived a year later, in 1185, during the decisive naval engagement at Dan no Ura. It was here, in the waters of the Seto Inland Sea, that the Taira clan rallied the remnants of its forces, pinning its last hopes on the superiority of its fleet and the presence of the child emperor Antoku aboard, who remained their ultimate trump card. Yet, Yoshitsune's genius once again confounded their plans. He managed to sway one of the Taira's allied fleets, which, at the critical moment, betrayed its masters and shattered their battle formations. By midday, the battle's outcome was clear. Recognizing that all was lost, many noblewomen of the Taira lineage, true to their code of honor, threw themselves into the waves, preferring death to disgrace. In this tragedy, Emperor Antoku himself, barely 8 years old, perished, swept away by the ocean depths. With him to the bottom went 3 sacred regalia, a mirror, a sword, and a jade jewel, symbols of the divine origin of imperial power. These artifacts, said to have been bestowed by the sun goddess Amaterasu herself, were the ultimate guarantor of any ruler's legitimacy on the throne. Their loss in the bay's waters, however temporary, marked not merely the end for the Taira clan, but also a profound spiritual shock for the entire nation, a symbolic rupture in the connection between the celestial and earthly realms. When the last battles faded, the country lay in ruins, but from the ashes of the old world, the contours of a new order, established by the victors, began to emerge. Though the imperial court in Kyoto formally continued to exist, preserving its ancient rituals and elaborate titles, it had become a mere shadow of its former self. The true center of decision-making shifted far to the east, to Kamakura, where Minamoto Yoritomo's military headquarters were established. From this new hub, an entirely different system of governance began to take shape, a system in which the right to power was no longer based on poetic elegance or noble lineage, but on the sharpness of a sword and unyielding martial discipline. Understanding the fragility of this new equilibrium, Yoritomo acted with considerable circumspection. The era of refined courtiers gave way to the dictatorship of stern warriors. Was this the only path to the nation's salvation, or simply one form of tyranny replaced by another, clad in different armor. Operating with calculated caution, Yoritomo publicly demonstrated profound deference to the imperial throne, cloaking his reforms in traditional forms. However, in practice, he incrementally seized the true reins of power. As early as 1185, he secured the right to appoint military administrators to the eastern provinces of the country, and in subsequent years, he extended this authority throughout all of Japan, forging a new vertical power structure. He introduced the positions of military governors, or shugo, and estate managers, or jito, which were now hereditary. Each new line of this nascent military service class became bound by ties of personal loyalty directly to the military center in Kamakura. The old court bureaucracy, whose influence was built on noble birth and calligraphic artistry, rapidly lost its significance. It was forced to yield its place to those who had earned trust not at a bureaucratic desk, but in the bloody crucible of battle. The emperor continued to be the sacred center of the nation's ritual life. He still issued decrees and granted honorary titles, but now every such act required prior approval from Kamakura. This system fundamentally transformed the very nature of power. Ancient rituals persisted, but their symbolic content was subordinated to the harsh logic of practical utility. Yoritomo fully understood that the true stability of his regime rested not on outward splendor and lavish ceremonies, but on strict order, unquestioning obedience, and personal accountability. By the close of the 12th century, tensions between the nation's most powerful clans reached a boiling point. For decades, the Taira and Minamoto had been meticulously amassing power, expanding their armies, forging alliances, and vying for influence within the imperial court. Their fierce rivalry for supreme authority erupted into a full-scale armed conflict, etched into the annals of history as the Genpei War. This clash, which swept across nearly the entire breadth of Japan, marked a profound turning point, forever dividing the era of court aristocracy from the age of the warrior class. For the first time in the nation's chronicles, it was the samurai, not the manipulative court schemers, who determined the destiny of the realm. The official catalyst for the war, however, was a dispute over imperial succession. And while the struggle ostensibly centered on installing a favored candidate on the throne, the true stakes in this high-stakes game were immeasurably greater: the very future of Japan itself. By the year 1179, the Taira clan, steered by its patriarch Kiyomori, had ascended to the zenith of its power, effectively usurping control of the imperial court's levers of authority. By placing his own grandson, the young Antoku, upon the chrysanthemum throne, Kiyomori transformed himself into a shadowy regent, holding the entirety of true power firmly within his grasp. Such a brazen ascent by a single lineage inevitably bred a deep-seated yet all-consuming resentment among the ancient aristocracy and rival clans, especially within the ranks of their perennial adversaries, the Minamoto house. The aristocracy's patience finally wore thin in early 1180, when Prince Mochihito, having secured the backing of Minamoto Yorimasa, openly issued a call to arms to overthrow the Taira dictatorship and restore legitimate order within the imperial family. This initial rebellion, however, was doomed from the outset. Barely igniting, it was almost instantaneously crushed, and the prince himself fell during the retreat. Minamoto Yorimasa, finding himself encircled by enemy forces within a temple compound, chose a path that would forever etch his name into the annals of history. Refusing the dishonor of capture, he performed the ritual disembowelment, an act that stands as the first documented instance of seppuku. This was no mere death. It was a deliberate and profound demonstration of warrior honor, transforming his defeat into a moral triumph and setting the standard for a dignified exit from life for the entire samurai class. Despite the failure of this initial uprising, it served as the very spark that ignited the flames of full-scale civil war. The banner of resistance was seized by Minamoto Yoritomo, a scion of a collateral branch of the clan who had, until this moment, been living in exile in the remote province of Izu. It was there, far from the machinations of the capital, that he methodically began to forge the bedrock of his future authority, gathering loyal followers, organizing an army, and constructing his own administrative system, wholly independent of the court. His call resonated deeply across the eastern regions of the country. Not only his father's old vassals flocked to Yoritomo, but also new forces disgruntled by the Taira's hegemony, powerful Buddhist monasteries and independent landowners alike. The small town of Kamakura transformed into the epicenter of this burgeoning movement, becoming the nascent seed of a future military government, the shogunate. The military conflict soon engulfed the entirety of Japan, from the coastal plains of the Sato Inland Sea to the rugged mountain passes of the north. Battles were waged with unprecedented brutality, leaving behind a trail of ruined settlements and claiming thousands of lives on both sides. A pivotal figure in this sanguinary theater of war was Minamoto Yoshitsune, Yoritomo's younger brother, whose strategic brilliance and personal valor became the stuff of legend. His genius was fully unleashed in the year 1184 during the Battle of Ichinotani. Yoshitsune achieved the unthinkable. He led his forces around enemy fortifications, traversing virtually impassable mountain slopes and crashing down upon the Taira army from an utterly unexpected direction. This sudden and brilliantly executed maneuver yielded a devastating effect. The Taira forces, engulfed in panic, were utterly routed and sent scattering, losing many of their commanders. The culmination of this protracted feud arrived a year later, in 1185, during the decisive naval engagement at Dan no Ura. It was here, in the waters of the Sato Inland Sea, that the Taira clan rallied the remnants of its forces, pinning its last hopes on the superiority of its fleet and the presence of the child emperor Antoku aboard, who remained their ultimate trump card. Yet, Yoshitsune's genius once again confounded their plans. He managed to sway one of the Taira's allied fleets, which, at the critical moment, betrayed its masters and shattered their battle formations. By midday, the battle's outcome was clear. Recognizing that all was lost, many noble women of the Taira lineage, true to their code of honor, threw themselves into the waves, preferring death to disgrace. In this tragedy, Emperor Antoku himself, barely 8 years old, perished, swept away by the ocean depths. With him to the bottom went 3 sacred regalia, a mirror, a sword, and a jade jewel, symbols of the divine origin of imperial power. These artifacts, said to have been bestowed by the sun goddess Amaterasu herself, were the ultimate guarantor of any ruler's legitimacy on the throne. Their loss in the bay's waters, however temporary, marked not merely the end for the Taira clan, but also a profound spiritual shock for the entire nation, a symbolic rupture in the connection between the celestial and earthly realms. When the last battles faded, the country lay in ruins, but from the ashes of the old world, the contours of a new order, established by the victors, began to emerge. Though the imperial court in Kyoto formally continued to exist, preserving its ancient rituals and elaborate titles, it had become a mere shadow of its former self. The true center of decision-making shifted far to the east, to Kamakura, where Minamoto Yoritomo's military headquarters were established. From this new hub, an entirely different system of governance began to take shape, a system in which the right to power was no longer based on poetic elegance or noble lineage, but on the sharpness of a sword and unyielding martial discipline. Understanding the fragility of this new equilibrium, Yoritomo acted with considerable circumspection. The era of refined courtiers gave way to the dictatorship of stern warriors. Was this the only path to the nation's salvation, or simply one form of tyranny replaced by another, clad in different armor? Operating with calculated caution, Yoritomo publicly demonstrated profound deference to the imperial throne, cloaking his reforms in traditional forms. However, in practice, he incrementally seized the true reins of power. As early as 1185, He secured the right to appoint military administrators to the eastern provinces of the country, and in subsequent years, he extended this authority throughout all of Japan, forging a new vertical power structure. He introduced the positions of military governors, or shugo, and estate managers, or jito, which were now hereditary. Each new line of this nascent military service class became bound by ties of personal loyalty directly to the military center in Kamakura. The old court bureaucracy, whose influence was built on noble birth and calligraphic artistry, rapidly lost its significance. It was forced to yield its place to those who had earned trust not at a bureaucratic desk, but in the bloody crucible of battle. The emperor continued to be the sacred center of the nation's ritual life. He still issued decrees and granted honorary titles, but now every such act required prior approval from Kamakura. This system fundamentally transformed the very nature of power. Ancient rituals persisted, but their symbolic content was subordinated to the harsh logic of practical utility. Yoritomo fully understood that the true stability of his regime rested not on outward splendor and lavish ceremonies, but on strict order, unquestioning obedience, and personal accountability. In the year 1192, the emperor officially bestowed upon Yoritomo the title of Sei Taishogun, which translates to Great General who subdues the barbarians. In bygone eras, this exalted rank was bestowed upon military commanders embarking on campaigns to the northern frontiers against the indigenous Ainu tribes. Under Yoritomo, however, the title acquired an entirely new, sweeping significance, henceforth designating the supreme military ruler of all Japan. Thus, a unique political structure was formally enshrined in law, wherein the emperor remained the sacred but nominal head of state, while the full breadth of administrative and military power transferred to the shogun. Not all the heroes of the recent war, however, could find their rightful place within the new, rigorously hierarchical system that Yoritomo was so methodically constructing. His younger brother, Minamoto Yoshitsune, whose military prowess had played a decisive role in the Taira clan's defeat, enjoyed immense popularity among the samurai class. His fame as a commander, personal valor, and lightning-fast tactics forged a reputation that continued to resound across the nation even after the cessation of hostilities. This deafening renown stirred growing apprehension in Kamakura, where an order founded on strict obedience and a rigid, controllable hierarchy was being erected. Yoritomo systematically began to distance his brother from all affairs, and then ultimately issued an order for his arrest. Forewarned, Yoshitsune fled the capital and found refuge in the north, in Hiraizumi, under the patronage of the head of the powerful Fujiwara clan. There, under the protection of Fujiwara Hidehira, he spent his final months. However, upon the old ally's death, his successor chose to demonstrate loyalty to Kamakura and betrayed the fugitive. A detachment dispatched by Yoritomo surrounded Yoshitsune's residence, but he refused to surrender. Remaining with him until the very end was his most loyal companion, the legendary warrior monk Benkei. A product of the Sohei class, armed temple attendants who, in that era, constituted a formidable military power, Benkei wielded his weapon, an enormous naginata, with unparalleled mastery. Legends recount that he once stood on Gojo Bridge in Kyoto, challenging every sword-wielding warrior he encountered. He vanquished 999 opponents until he was finally defeated by the young Yoshitsune, to whom he thereafter swore eternal fealty. Over the years of war, he had become a living legend. His colossal stature, superhuman strength, and absolute devotion to his master instilled awe even in his enemies. When the final siege began, Benkei stood alone on the bridge leading to the estate. His mission: to hold back the enemy onslaught at any cost, buying his lord precious time. His massive armored figure, heavy naginata at the ready, completely blocked the pass. The soldiers dispatched from Kamakura hesitated to approach, knowing full well the legend who stood before them. Even the most seasoned warriors dared not attack a man capable of single-handedly annihilating dozens. So they simply shot him down with arrows. Arrow after arrow pierced his body, yet he remained upright. When the barrage ceased and the soldiers finally mustered the courage to advance, they found the giant dead, but still defiantly holding his ground. While Benkei performed his final heroic stand, Yoshitsune, inside the estate, committed ritual suicide. His name was expunged from Kamakura's official chronicles, yet it lived on forever in popular memory as the epitome of a tragic hero. Was his end an inevitable sacrifice on the altar of nation-building, or an act of fratricidal envy that forever cast a shadow over the founder of the first shogunate? His image was eternally enshrined in legends as that of a tragic hero, one for whom honor was prized immeasurably above position and power. Over time, he transformed into a mythical figure, becoming the central character of theatrical plays, epic tales, and poetic ballads, a living embodiment of true valor, cast aside by the cold pragmatism of the new regime. Meanwhile, the pragmatic order established by Yoritomo steadily solidified, permeating every facet of the nation's life. Kamakura transformed from a mere military residence into the veritable brain and steel heart of Japan. From this city, like vital arteries, decrees flowed across the land, new appointments were dispatched, taxes converged, and battle-ready units were forged. The state entered a new era, its entire system of governance resting on three foundational pillars: iron military discipline, unshakable clan loyalty, and an intricate web of vassal obligations. The role of the sword in the state's architecture was definitively enshrined, and the path of the samurai now became the sole route to the pinnacles of power. In the mid-13th century, this nascent warrior class faced a threat that arose not from within, but from beyond, a force utterly incommensurable with anything the land had ever known. Up until then, all conflicts, however bloody, had unfolded between Japanese clans within a shared culture and universally understood rules of warfare. Now, an adversary of an entirely different caliber appeared on the horizon. On the continent, the colossal Mongol Empire was gaining formidable power, having already swallowed China, Korea, and a significant portion of Southeast Asia. Its ruler, Kublai Khan, grandson of the legendary Genghis Khan, had proclaimed himself Emperor of China and founder of the Yuan dynasty, and his ambitious plans included the subjugation of the Japanese islands. The first message from Kublai Khan, composed in Chinese, was delivered to Kamakura in the year 1260. It contained no direct threats, but its essence was unequivocally clear: a demand to acknowledge the supremacy of the Mongol dominion. The Japanese court, encompassing both the emperor and the shogunate, chose to disregard this missive. New messages followed, each bearing the same ultimatum, yet Kamakura maintained an icy silence. For the Mongol overlord, unaccustomed to refusal, such defiance amounted to a brazen challenge, and he commenced preparations for a full-scale military invasion. The first expedition launched in 1274. The Mongol fleet, sailing from Korean ports, descended upon the islands of Tsushima and Iki, where the scant Japanese garrisons were virtually annihilated. This was a clash of two distinct worlds. Samurai, whose tactics revolved around individual valor and ritualized duels, encountered an army that operated in disciplined formations, unleashed massed volleys of arrows, and wielded primitive gunpowder weapons, ceramic bombs filled with incendiary mixtures. In a fierce battle near Hakata Bay, the Japanese militia attempted to halt the landing but was pushed back. However, a colossal typhoon soon slammed into the coast, scattering and sinking a significant portion of the enemy fleet, forcing the invaders to retreat. This brief but devastating blow was a bitter revelation for Japan. For the first time in its history, the country faced a war waged by utterly alien rules. In response, the shogunate frantically began to reconstruct its entire defense system. Along the coast of Hakata Bay, construction commenced on a monumental defensive structure, a stone wall stretching over 20 kilometers and reaching up to 2.5 meters in height, fortified with moats and special platforms for archers. Local clans received strict orders to maintain standing garrisons, training their warriors based on the hard-won combat experience and practicing synchronized maneuvers. This marked the birth of the nation's first coastal defense system. The second, incomparably larger expedition was outfitted in 1281. Chinese chronicles attest that it involved over 140,000 men and approximately 4,000 vessels, a force that seemed insurmountable. The enemy armada once again approached the same stretch of coastline, but this time the Japanese were ready for them. On the shores of Kyushu, they were preparing not just for a battle, but for a total test of the strength of the entire new order forged in the fires of civil war. The fate of the samurai state was to be decided amidst the roar of the waves and the clang of steel. The defensive fortifications erected along the coast significantly slowed the invaders' advance, while daring night raids and constant attacks on their ships severely disrupted their supply lines. Despite the enemy's numerical superiority, the samurai, intimately familiar with their native terrain, employed exhausting guerrilla tactics, preventing the foe from establishing a foothold or pushing deeper into the island. The outcome of the entire confrontation was once again decided by the elements. A cataclysmic typhoon, which bore down on the invasion fleet, virtually obliterated the enemy ships. Thousands of warriors met their end in the raging waves, and those fortunate enough to survive were either captured or beat a hasty retreat. Subsequently, this natural phenomenon earned the name kamikaze, or divine wind, becoming for Japanese warriors not merely a symbol of miraculous salvation, but a sign of celestial blessing. Though the invasion was successfully repelled, the very threat from an external enemy had irreversibly impacted the spirit and worldview of the warrior class. The clash with the Mongol war machine forever altered the samurai's perception of warfare. While personal valor displayed in duels had previously been the ideal, now synchronized actions, well-planned defensive strategy, and the capacity for collective resistance took center stage. Previously fragmented clans began to unite not only to resolve internal disputes, but also for the joint defense of the coastline. Attention shifted towards strict discipline, logistics, and the creation of fortified positions. War had definitively transformed into a complex system. Following these events, Japan continued to live for a long time under the specter of a possible third invasion, which, however, never materialized. Kublai Khan passed away, his dream of conquering the Japanese islands unfulfilled. The Kamakura shogunate successfully defended the nation's independence, and the samurai class, hardened in the crucible of battle for national borders, solidified its position as the primary force protecting the state. However, the actions, decisions, and overall conduct of the Japanese warrior, both in battle and in times of peace, were governed not merely by military necessity, but by a profound inner order. This code of conduct, meticulously shaped over many centuries by ideals of duty, loyalty, and self-mastery, earned the concise and powerful name Bushido. Literally translating to the way of the warrior, this term acquired immense cultural significance during feudal Japan, encompassing not only martial arts, but also a holistic ethical system by which a samurai was expected to live, serve his lord, and face death. The foundation of Bushido formed gradually, absorbing Shintoist devotion to one's lineage and homeland, Buddhist fatalism towards suffering and death, and the Confucian cult of unconditional duty and respect for elders. This code was not codified into formal laws nor taught as a distinct academic discipline. It was assimilated from earliest childhood through a rigorous daily routine, the examples of elders, and the unquestioning execution of a lord's will. In a samurai family, a child received no theoretical explanations of Bushido's essence. From a young age, they were conditioned to obedience, accountability for their actions, maintaining composure in any situation, and understanding that duty always transcended personal gain. Only by the dawn of the 17th century, when an era of bloody wars gave way to prolonged peace, did Bushido begin to be articulated in philosophical texts and treatises, but in its original form, it remained a living, unwritten system, permeating all aspects of a warrior's existence. Even financial behavior reflected this internal discipline. A samurai who began to haggle or openly discuss the size of his remuneration would call his honor and reliability into question, which was considered utterly unacceptable in warrior culture. Compensation was not paid in coins. Instead, a retainer received income in koku, a notional unit representing the volume of rice sufficient to feed one person for 1 year. One koku was equivalent to approximately 150 kilograms of rice, and precisely this amount determined a warrior's rank, his status, and his capacity to support his family and vassals. A samurai received not money, but the right to harvest from the land allotted to him. This rice was then sold to merchants or exchanged for all necessary goods, from armor and weapons to writing paper. In large cities, entire trading houses operated, supplying warriors with fabrics, household items, and armaments, with all financial settlements conducted through managers who converted the value of the rice into its monetary equivalent. Only the wealthiest warriors could afford custom-made weapons or new ceremonial armor. The vast majority wore equipment inherited through generations. Legendary blades and robust armor served for decades, meticulously repaired, reforged, and passed from father to son as the greatest of relics. Was this code the zenith of spirit, creating an indomitable protector? Or was it a gilded cage in which individuality was sacrificed to impeccable service? Yet, lower-ranking samurai often lacked even the most basic necessities. They were compelled to borrow from merchants at steep interest rates, a practice that gradually ballooned into a crippling financial burden. Compounding this, the mere mention of money was considered degrading in this context, and receiving payment in hard coin, be it silver or copper, was perceived as a profound insult to one's honor. The great daimyo Takeda Shingen once famously declared, "A true samurai would sooner part with his last coin than stoop to haggling." Chronicles even preserve a tale of a warrior from the Mori clan who, in a fit of rage, slashed a length of fabric that he deemed offered at a humiliatingly low price. Even the most mundane behavior was considered an extension of their unwavering duty. The legendary Miyamoto Musashi, in his Book of Five Rings, instructed, "A warrior should enter a room as if an enemy lies in wait behind every screen." This mindset was ingrained from early youth and manifested in every facet of life, in the manner of presenting an object, in how a samurai departed a reception, or how he sat awaiting orders. In homes where duty was observed with utmost solemnity, any carelessness was deemed a sign of inner disarray and a weakening of spirit. Equally vital was emotional composure, seen as a mark of maturity and strength. The celebrated warlord, Date Masamune, taught his men that anger was a sword that first wounded the one who drew it. A warrior was expected to maintain complete control over his voice, to temper irritation, and to preserve absolute composure even in the most heated dispute. Any display of anger or resentment in conversation meant a loss of face, whereas respect was earned by those who remained calm and precise in their judgments, regardless of external circumstances. Martial discipline was harmoniously complemented by aesthetic cultivation. It was believed that a samurai was obligated to master the art of calligraphy, to fathom the depths of the tea ceremony, to compose poetry, and to cultivate a garden. These seemingly peaceful pursuits fostered the same inner focus and precise movements that were essential on the battlefield. As the great tea master Sen no Rikyu put it, "The tea room is a battlefield where one confronts one's own weaknesses." Art, then, served as a powerful instrument for fortifying inner discipline. A paramount aspect of their upbringing was the conquest of the fear of death. Young warriors were sent to cemeteries or recent battlefields, left in complete solitude among the fallen, to habituate them to the constant presence of mortality. Araki Murashige recounted in his diary how instructors compelled disciples to remain beside the deceased until the initial tension entirely dissipated. This was not a punishment, but rather a rigorous training designed to forge the ability to maintain composure amidst the most volatile and terrifying environments. A samurai who endured such trials gained the experience to control himself even in the face of inevitable demise, to suppress inner panic, and to act with chilling precision. Their relationship with mortality was defined by this profound inner clarity. From a young age, the warrior embraced it not as a tragedy, but as a natural extension of his service. This empowered him to act without the slightest hesitation. When an order demanded a charge, he rose. When circumstances called for self-sacrifice, he advanced without a second thought. A deep awareness of life's finitude imbued every one of his actions with an absolute sense of completion. One instructor wrote, "If you know this day might end in death, then every endeavor is pursued to its utmost conclusion." Samurai history abounds with countless examples of such conscious self-sacrifice, the most celebrated being the heroic deed of Kusunoki Masashige. Obeying an imperial command that was a death sentence in itself, he fought to the bitter end in a doomed battle, and when the outcome became undeniable, he performed the ritual suicide of seppuku alongside his son. His act became a gold standard of loyalty and unyielding resolve, for he fought not for victory, but in the name of fulfilling his duty. Such fidelity commanded respect even from adversaries. However, a path where honor is valued immeasurably above life rarely grants one the luxury of choice. Where another might retreat to survive, a samurai was bound to stand his ground and embrace his destiny. When the warrior's inner code clashed with profound dishonor, devastating defeat, or the inability to fulfill his duty, death remained the sole honorable recourse. But this was no spontaneous demise of a desperate soul. It was a rigorous ritual, precise down to its every movement, known as seppuku, a method by which a samurai could safeguard his honor, even when all else was irrevocably lost. Within this ritual, serving as the ultimate act of will, lay not weakness, but the supreme form of control over one's own destiny. It was an act of supreme volitional concentration, demonstrating that the samurai remained master of his fate until the very end. It was performed in cases of indelible disgrace, crushing defeat, defiance of an order, or even as a form of political protest. Some warriors undertook it at their lord's command. In such instances, the ritual became a form of punishment that nevertheless preserved the condemned's honor. Others did so voluntarily to avert humiliating captivity or to voice their dissent regarding their overlord's decision. But in every one of these scenarios, seppuku was a gesture through which an individual proved worthy of being remembered by posterity as a true warrior. The ritual was conducted in strict adherence to established rules. The samurai donned white robes, symbolizing purity, knelt, exposed his abdomen, then took a short sword, known as a tanto, and made a horizontal incision. The blade was to travel from left to right, slowly and deeply, demanding extreme concentration from the practitioner. In exceptional instances, warriors performed a second, vertical incision, an act that required truly superhuman willpower and occurred exceedingly rarely. Nevertheless, such instances are recorded in the chronicles. One of the most renowned examples is the seppuku of Asakura Narikage in the 16th century. He declined the assistance of an attendant, performed 2 complete incisions, and met death without uttering a single sound, showcasing unparalleled self-possession. Such acts were regarded as the ultimate testament to inner discipline. Yet, in the vast majority of cases, standing behind the one performing the ritual was a kaishakunin, an attendant entrusted with its completion. Their task was, at the precise moment, to decapitate the samurai with a single, expert sword stroke. This was done not out of cruelty, but in the name of preserving dignity. In this way, the warrior was spared any potential cries, grimaces of unbearable pain, or death throes that might dishonor his final act. The kaishakunin's skill was prized exceptionally highly. They had to deliver the blow with such surgical precision that the head would not roll away, but rather remain attached by a thin strip of skin and gently fall into the folded hands, symbolizing a serene completion of life's journey. To perfect such a strike, future kaishakunin were sometimes trained on condemned criminals, an act considered a unique form of service where the very moment of decapitation became an integral part of the ritual. Before performing seppuku, a samurai would typically compose a farewell poem. This act was an essential component of the process of inner focus. Such poems, known as jisei, expressed a calm acceptance of the end. In concise, succinct lines, the warrior sought to encapsulate the entire essence of his life and the meaning of its conclusion. These were usually quatrains, devoid of complaint, grandiose rhetoric, fuss, or pleas, simply a final summation. One such death poem was penned by Kusunoki Masashige. Cherry blossoms bloom, but their petals do not linger long. So too, I fall and return to dust. There also existed a female form of the ritual, known as jigai. A woman would not disembowel herself, but rather slit her throat. Beforehand, she would tightly bind her legs with a cord or sash, ensuring her body maintained a dignified posture even after death. A knife for jigai, an acute short blade wrapped in cloth, was kept in every samurai household, and women were aware of its precise location. If defeat in battle became inevitable, if a husband perished, or if the real threat of capture arose, they wielded it with the same unwavering resolve as men. This right was not incumbent upon all women, but rather a right and duty for those belonging to warrior families. From childhood, they were schooled in fortitude, clan loyalty, and inner self-control, and sometimes mothers performed jigai alongside their daughters. Thus, readiness for death transcended being merely a part of life. It became its paramount meaning, transforming one's departure from it into the ultimate, most flawless act of service. The warrior's path often concluded with the downfall of his lineage as he followed his lord into oblivion. At other times, when duty was fulfilled and all battles had ceased, he would withdraw into silence and solitude, for further existence in this world lost all meaning. The essence of a samurai manifested not only in his precise gestures, reserved demeanor, and carefully chosen words, it was inseparable from his attire and, more profoundly, from his weaponry. It was the steel of his armor and the blade of his sword that silently narrated his life, how he lived, how he served with unwavering loyalty, and how he embraced his death. At the heart of this identity lay the katana, a sword that transcended mere weaponry to become the veritable emblem of the warrior class. This blade was the tangible embodiment of an entire philosophical worldview, built upon reverence, stringent discipline, and adherence to intricate rituals. The process of forging a katana was itself a supreme art form, bordering on a sacred ceremony. Each blade emerged from a unique steel alloy known as tamahagane, which the master smith refined from iron sand over a laborious multi-day process. The raw steel, once obtained, was subjected to a meticulous process of repeated purification, folding into layers and incessant hammering. Some renowned masters would repeat this grueling cycle dozens of times, meticulously crafting a metal structure that was simultaneously incredibly dense, resilient, and, in a profound sense, alive. The culmination of this painstaking labor was a blade possessing unique properties. Its cutting edge boasted an unsurpassed hardness, while its core remained softer and more pliable. Such a design empowered the blade not only to deliver deep, cleaving blows, but also to withstand colossal stresses, flexing without fracturing. The standard katana blade typically ranged from 60 to 80 centimeters in length. Depending on the school and the signature style of the individual master, the sword might be a bit shorter or longer, boast a different curve, or have a distinct point of balance. Its weight and geometry were meticulously calculated to allow a warrior to unleash a lightning-fast strike the very instant the blade cleared its scabbard. So revered was the katana that its value often surpassed the cost of all other military accoutrements combined. A blade of exceptional craftsmanship could command the price of several hectares of fertile rice paddies, and it was guarded as a priceless treasure. Despite its refined form and the richly adorned details of its hilt and guard, the katana was forged, first and foremost, for mortal combat. Its characteristic curve, single-edged sharpness, and precisely engineered balance were all subservient to a single, paramount objective: to achieve maximum speed, precision, and destructive force in motion. The most effective strike was considered to be one delivered the instant the blade was drawn, a technique known as katsutodachi, where defense and offense merged into a single, imperceptible motion. A samurai learned to wear the sword at a precise angle, enabling a single step and body turn to release the blade, deliver a blow, and seamlessly return to a defensive stance. Often, this very first movement determined the outcome of the entire skirmish. Handling the sword adhered to the most rigorous etiquette. It was never laid with the blade facing outward, nor was it ever passed to anyone using only one hand. When transferring it, a warrior would first remove the sword from his obi, sash, turn the blade toward himself to demonstrate peaceful intent, and only then extend it to the recipient with both hands. This ritual underscored a complete understanding of responsibility for the weapon. Even in the peaceful setting of a home, the sword remained an integral part of an inner code. Resting on a dedicated stand, its blade always pointed toward its owner, a constant reminder that the responsibility for it rested squarely on their shoulders. The blade was often given a name, for it was considered not merely an instrument, but a loyal companion and an extension of the warrior's very soul. To lose the sword was tantamount to losing one's honor. The katana was bequeathed from one generation to the next as a cherished family heirloom. It was meticulously preserved in a specialized box, regularly cleaned with the softest rice paper, and meticulously oiled with clove oil. Traces of blood on the blade were considered not only detrimental to the steel, but also disgraceful to the warrior, which is why, after every battle, the sword was immediately purified. Neglecting this duty invariably led to a loss of respect. Even amidst the chaos of battle, an inner order prevailed, and the weapon adhered to the same lofty principles. While the katana stands as an undisputed symbol of the samurai spirit, the actual battlefield demanded tactical versatility from a warrior. A true master commanded not just one, but an entire arsenal of diverse weaponry, intuitively understanding which tool to employ in any given situation and against any particular adversary. The choice hinged on a multitude of factors: distance to the foe, type of armor worn, density of formations, unique terrain features, and even weather conditions. Each weapon type revealed a specific facet of martial artistry, from crushing might to absolute control, from surgical precision to extraordinary endurance. Among the most formidable blades was the nodachi, a massive field sword that dwarfed the katana, nearly doubling it in size. Its blade could stretch from 120 to 150 centimeters long, while its hilt measured half a person's height. Such a colossal sword was not worn at the waist, but rather carried on the back or transported by an armor-bearer. Drawing it from its scabbard was only possible in motion, requiring a sweeping, expansive arc. It was a weapon of breakthrough, of colossal might, and of profound psychological deterrence. In the hands of a seasoned warrior, the nodachi was capable of cleaving through not only heavy armor with a single blow, but also the very horse beneath the rider. And in this stark contrast between a personal blade that housed his very soul and a brutal arsenal forged for total war, the core question emerged: what was the true essence of the samurai? Was he the guardian of a sacred symbol, or a pragmatic soldier for whom the end always justified the means? A warrior wielding such a colossal blade invariably spearheaded the advance, shattering enemy formations and breaching defenses. His presence on the battlefield was akin to a force of nature, slow, inexorable, and utterly unstoppable. Beyond this, every samurai also unfailingly carried a wakizashi, a shorter sword with a blade measuring up to 60 centimeters. It formed an inseparable pair with the katana, creating a set known as the daisho, which literally translates to big and small. The wakizashi's purpose was to provide crucial defense in close quarters, protection in confined corridors or dense forests, and control over an adversary in situations where the longer sword became a hindrance. A samurai never parted with his wakizashi, even while within his own home. This blade accompanied him during moments when, by etiquette, his primary weapon remained outside the threshold. It was drawn from its scabbard only with cool, clear intent, utterly devoid of hesitation. Moreover, this short sword served as the ritual instrument for performing seppuku, the act of ritual suicide resorted to when honor demanded the ultimate sacrifice. The samurai's extensive arsenal also included the yari, a spear often featuring a straight, leaf-shaped or rhomboid tip. This was one of the most versatile and widespread weapons, ideally suited for formation combat. Its shaft could extend to 2 and sometimes even 3 meters in length. The yari was actively employed in defending fortress walls, within dense infantry formations, and during grueling marches. It was used to maintain a safe distance, pierce armor, and halt cavalry charges. Many warrior clans placed primary emphasis on training their forces in spear techniques, recognizing them as the most organized, rhythmic, and effective for mass engagements. While the yari offered less scope for individualistic swordplay, it empowered the warrior to act as a unified, seamless component within a squad. In decisive battles, it was often the spearman who anchored the flanks and absorbed the initial onslaught, buying invaluable time for swordsmen and archers. The deceptive simplicity of this weapon's design masked a profound mastery, demanding precise movements, formidable physical strength, and an unerring sense of distance. Another prevalent polearm was the naginata, a sword-like curved blade mounted atop a long shaft. This elegant yet devastating weapon was notably common in the hands of women from samurai lineages, who were trained from a young age in the art of defense in the event of a siege. These warrior women, known as onabugeisha, honed their skills from childhood. Within their homes, the naginata transcended being mere weaponry. It became a powerful emblem of hearth protection, clan strength, and unyielding resilience. It was a weapon of deterrence and last-ditch defense. A woman wielding a naginata would confront invaders at her dwelling's entrance, delivering broad, sweeping cuts capable of disorienting an opponent or cleaving through armor. There were renowned clans where young women trained in martial arts alongside their brothers. During tumultuous periods, amidst the chaos of internecine wars and sieges, onabugeisha fought shoulder to shoulder with men. The naginata was also a favored weapon of the militant monks, the sohei. These monastic warrior units remarkably combined rigorous spiritual discipline with supreme combat readiness. The sohei effectively deployed naginatas in formation, repelling assaults or descending upon enemy columns from the flanks. Their technique was precise, calculated, and exceptionally tenacious. They did not seek one-on-one duels. Their tactic was to shatter the enemy's advance rhythm, exhaust them, and dismantle their formations. Their strikes were never redundant. Each movement was a calculated counter to the enemy's actions. Among the most fearsome long-range weapons was the yumi, a unique, asymmetrical bow that sometimes exceeded 2 meters in length. Its upper limb was significantly longer than the lower, allowing for equally effective shooting from a kneeling position, on horseback, or from behind cover. The art of mastering the yumi, known as kyudo, demanded not only immense physical strength, but also impeccable control over breath, body, and, most crucially, the attainment of complete inner stillness. A seasoned archer could strike a target over 100 meters away with the first shot. Warriors who reached the pinnacle of kyudo mastery were revered as epitomes of absolute self-control. There are documented instances where captured samurai, renowned for their marksmanship, were permanently crippled by having their arms broken to prevent them from drawing a bowstring. This was not born of sadistic cruelty, but of primal fear. These individuals could alter the outcome of a battle with a single arrow, and they commanded respect even from their sworn enemies. The Yumi also played a significant role in rituals. It was customary before battle to release a singing arrow, which, with its whistle in the profound silence, announced readiness for combat and served as a final warning. A warrior who had perfected all these weapon types acted purely out of practical necessity. He knew unerringly when he needed a heavy blade for a breakthrough, when a short one for a tight skirmish, when the curved naginata blade, and when a deadly arrow flying from afar. He embraced and employed each tool with cold precision. His warrior's path was paved by mastering each of these implements, and each became a part of his infallible decision-making. However, the samurai's combat persona was not shaped by weaponry alone. His armor was an equally eloquent and crucial component of this great warrior culture. But what if armor wasn't just protection, but a sort of living map of a warrior's life, where every dent and scratch told its own unique story? A samurai's armor served not only as a physical barrier against an enemy blade, but also as a kind of warrior's passport. It protected the body, denoted rank within the military hierarchy, allowed for instant differentiation of ally from foe in the chaos of battle, and bore the heraldic marks of personal and clan affiliation. Into every detail of this gear were woven centuries of armor-crafting knowledge and austere tactical experience. By the mere sight of the armor, one could ascertain the century in which the warrior served, his social status, the region where he was raised, and the powerful lineage to which he belonged. The classic attire of early samurai was the o-yoroi, a heavy and complex suit of armor assembled from thousands of lacquered plates meticulously joined together with vibrant silk cords. The foundation of these formidable suits of armor comprised lamella segments, small rectangular plates crafted from boiled leather, iron, or bronze. Each plate was painstakingly lacquered with multiple layers to shield the metal from corrosive moisture and impart additional strength to the overall structure. Every single plate underwent precise heat treatment and was meticulously shaped by hand by master craftsmen. A dense, yet remarkably flexible lacing system granted the armor its exceptional pliability, superbly cushioning against impacts and facilitating crucial ventilation. The level of protection, however, varied strategically. The chest and shoulders were heavily reinforced with additional elements, while the abdomen and hips maintained maximum freedom of movement. Later, during the brutal Sengoku period, often known as the Age of Warring States, the domaru gained widespread prominence. This lighter suit of armor, fitting more snugly around the torso, was perfectly suited for ferocious close-quarters combat. It was simpler and quicker to produce, becoming the primary equipment for vast infantry armies and enabling effective fighting in confined spaces. This type of armor, widely adopted by the armies of powerful daimyo, combined reliable protection with high mobility, becoming standard issue for entire regiments. The undisputed centerpiece of any armor ensemble was the helmet, or kabuto, meticulously crafted from robust iron plates joined by sturdy rivets. Its ingeniously designed spherical form caused enemy blades and arrows to glance harmlessly off its surface. The helmet's surface was lacquered, often adorned with a decorative crest, while a multi-layered neck guard, known as the shikoro, was securely attached at the rear. The front of the kabuto was often embellished with instantly recognizable symbols, stylized horns, clan emblems, or powerful depictions of the sun, birds of prey, or crescent moons. These distinctive details served as crucial identifiers, helping swiftly pinpoint a commander amidst the chaos of the battlefield. Remarkably, each helmet was meticulously crafted not only to reflect the wearer's status, but also to embody their very character. Often paired with the kabuto was the menpo, a fearsome facial mask that covered the lower half of the face and provided additional securement for the helmet. It was typically crafted from metal or reinforced leather, lacquered and sculpted with features designed to amplify its menacing expression. Prominent cheekbones, predatory moustaches, and bestial fangs. Particularly common were masks mimicking the terrifying visages of Oni demons, creating a truly spine-chilling spectacle. The mask served to obliterate human features, transforming the wearer into a faceless, indomitable force, seemingly devoid of fear or hesitation. Chronicles recount gripping tales of how a detachment from the Uesugi clan, clad in dark armor and masks adorned with fanged grimaces, instantly sowed panic among enemy infantry simply by their terrifying appearance as they approached a fortified slope. The complete battle ensemble also included massive shoulder guards, forearm guards, elbow guards, shin guards, and a segmented skirt protecting the thighs. All these elements were held securely in place by an intricate lacing system crisscrossing the chest, back, and shoulders. The total weight of a suit of armor typically ranged from 12 to 15 kilograms, yet, when properly fitted, it imposed virtually no restriction on movement. A samurai could run, shoot from a kneeling position, scale siege ladders, engage in mounted combat, and deliver powerful cleaving blows, all while maintaining peak maneuverability through hours of grueling battle. These suits of armor were meticulously crafted to reflect not only the personal taste, but also the exalted status of their owner. Lacquers of every conceivable hue were employed, alongside precious silk lacing and decorative overlays of gleaming copper and gold. While no strict, universally accepted color symbolism existed, certain combinations nonetheless became traditional hallmarks for specific clans over time. Thus, within the intricate weave of silk lacing and the profound sheen of lacquer, aesthetics became utterly indistinguishable from tactics. Beauty itself transformed into yet another potent weapon, whose silent language on the battlefield could prove no less deadly than the sharp edge of a masterfully forged blade. The hue of the lacing that bound the armor plates was no mere embellishment. It served as a form of heraldic language. Deep indigo shades signaled a warrior's allegiance to an ancient and storied lineage, their history stretching back through countless centuries. By contrast, vibrant crimson ensembles served as a fierce declaration. They were donned by warriors from units who charged into battle with reckless abandon, ready to embrace death for victory's sake. A classic example is the army of Takeda Shingen, whose crimson-clad warriors epitomized an unstoppable offensive drive, openly defying their foes. In the later Edo period, the highest military aristocracy favored an austere pairing of black lacquer and gold overlays, a testament not only to their elevated status, but also to their refined taste, inner discipline, and profound family pride. The art of armor crafting was a deeply guarded secret, meticulously passed down from generation to generation within weaponsmithing families. The finest examples, forged by the hands of master artisans, endured for decades, transforming into cherished family heirlooms. The inner surface of the cuirass often bore an engraving of the first owner's name, the date of manufacture, and occasionally a brief warrior's oath, or the name of their feudal lord, serving as an eternal symbol of fealty. These inscriptions were preserved and revered, forming an unseen bond between generations of warriors. Some samurai transformed their armor into a living chronicle, etching the names of fallen comrades or the great battles they had survived. Preparing armor for battle was a ritual of intense focus. The lacquer on the plates was renewed, the silk cords were tightened with precise tension, and every metallic component was meticulously inspected for the slightest blemish. Impeccably maintained armor was more than a mere status symbol. It was the tangible manifestation of inner order, mental discipline, and unwavering devotion to duty. The condition of a warrior's armor reflected directly upon them and the honor of their entire clan. During times of peace, a suit of armor occupied a place of honor within the home, displayed on a special wooden frame, like a silent guardian of family history. It became a central element in important family ceremonies, coming-of-age rites, the succession of a new clan head, or solemn mourning rituals. Just as temples served as bastions of spiritual life, martial arts schools or dojo were the sanctums of the warrior's path. The warrior's journey began in early childhood, at the tender age of 6 or 7 years old, and this rigorous training continued until the very end of their life. Powerful clans maintained their own exclusive training centers, where the secrets of mastery were imparted from mentors to students across many generations, cultivating not only technical prowess, but also an unbreakable hierarchy, profound respect for weaponry, and an absolute sense of duty. By the dawn of the Kamakura period, this system had attained a clear structure. The most prestigious schools were located near centers of political power, in Kamakura, Kyoto, and later in Edo. Some dojo were established within temples, others within the walls of mighty rulers' castles, while certain provincial schools enjoyed the direct patronage of the shogunate, receiving official authorization to teach. Training was built upon a potent triad: demonstration, relentless repetition, and practical application. The master would exhibit the ideal form, and the student was expected to replicate it with impeccable physical precision. Errors were corrected without words, with a single, precise gesture. Every step, every stance, every movement was woven into a rigorous regimen that sculpted not only the body, but the very character of the warrior. By the middle of the 16th century, entire dynasties of masters had emerged, who had elevated martial arts instruction into a hereditary calling. One such legendary tradition was the Shinkaji-ryu school, founded by Yagyu Muneyoshi. His teachings absorbed the profound wisdom of Kamizumi Nobutsuna, a great master from an older school who had taught throughout the military districts of central Japan. After Tokugawa Ieyasu successfully unified the country, the founder's son Munenori was summoned to court and granted the highest honor, to become the shogun's personal instructor. Among his distinguished students were both Ieyasu himself and his heirs, a patronage that secured the Shinkaji-ryu school an official status and the exclusive right to train the ruling house's closest associates. The school's teaching methodology unfolded in stages, beginning with the fundamental mastery of space and balance. Only after thoroughly grasping these foundational principles would a student progress to learning the Katsujinkan strike, literally, the sword that grants life. This term encapsulated a profound philosophy. It described not merely an attack, but a single, flawlessly precise action that concluded a duel at the singular, opportune moment. According to the school's treatises, this decisive strike emerged at the razor's edge between impeccable observation and instantaneous action, precisely when an opponent completely exposed themselves. Mastery of Katsujinkan was considered the ultimate hallmark of a warrior's maturity. The master expected from students such a degree of self-possession and concentration that an entire confrontation could be resolved by a singular decisive movement, preempting conflict at its very inception. Within this profound philosophy of martial arts, the boundary between mastery and spiritual insight blurred, becoming almost imperceptible. No one could definitively say where the path of the sword concluded and the path of the spirit truly began. Training sessions in the dojo commenced long before the sun's first rays touched the earth, unfolding in a strictly regimented order. The master meticulously oversaw every facet of technique execution, from body posture and footwork to the precise direction of the student's gaze. Paired practice was only permitted after many years of tenacious dedication to basic forms, once movements had become utterly instinctive. Every action was invariably synchronized with a powerful exhalation and a precise full-body lock. In many schools, the practice of seated meditation, or zazen, was an indispensable part of the daily routine, viewed as the paramount tool for cultivating inner stability and mental clarity. Students remained for hours in utter stillness, concentrating solely on their own breath and inner rhythm, time marked only by the deliberate fall of water droplets or the slow, serene smouldering of aromatic incense sticks. Such a regimen not only sharpened focus and honed perception to their keenest edge, but also harmoniously fused physical perfection, psychological resilience, and the intricate rules of social interaction. The teachings of the Yagyu Shinkaj Ryu school proved so remarkably resilient that they not only outlasted the fall of the shogunate, but the founders' descendants continued to transmit their mastery well into the 20th century. The technical forms, philosophical treatises, and internal documents of this tradition are still studied to this very day, and its core principles laid the foundational bedrock for later martial arts such as Kendo and Aikido. Yet alongside these ancient, highly structured traditions, there emerged an entirely different path to the pinnacle of mastery, a path forged by a man whose art was not born within school walls, but tempered in the crucible of real combat. His name was Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary wandering swordsman, artist, and philosopher. He became the living embodiment of the idea that true perfection can arise even beyond formal systems if one possesses the indomitable will to follow their chosen path to its absolute conclusion. Musashi was born in the late 16th century, a time when the era of bloody civil strife was drawing to a close. His early biography is shrouded in mystery, but he himself claimed to have won his first duel at the age of 13 and suffered no defeats thereafter. His unique style was forged far from the dogmas of established schools, in countless duels, in brutal clan skirmishes, and daring combat excursions where the sole measure of mastery was survival. The name of his school, Nitan Ichiryu, translates to the School of Two Heavens as One, and its foundation was the revolutionary principle of fighting with two swords simultaneously. In classical samurai tradition, the short sword, the wakizashi, was considered a weapon for confined spaces or a last resort for survival, but Musashi completely redefined its role. He developed a system where the long katana and the short wakizashi became equally vital instruments, with the left and right hands performing different tasks, operating within a singular, unified design. His school was built upon absolute adaptability. He taught his students to consider everything: the structure of the space, the direction of light, the position of the sun, the specific characteristics of an opponent's weapon, and even their temperament. For Musashi, combat was a form of exploration, where every movement was subject to cold calculation, and the decisive strike was delivered only at the precise moment the situation became crystal clear. Musashi immortalized his principles in the renowned treatise, the Book of Five Rings. Within it, he laid out the fundamentals of perceiving an opponent, choosing rhythm and distance, and articulated the concept of the strike into emptiness, a technique where an attack commences even before an opponent can formulate a counteraction. Victory, according to his teachings, was achieved by stripping away all superfluity when movement perfectly aligned with the opportune moment. This school, passed down through a direct lineage of discipleship, endures to this very day. Its followers study not only the art of the dual blades, but also Musashi's calligraphy, his drawings, and his principles of composition, for he himself emphasized that the path of the sword and the path of the artist's brush originate from a single source. It was into such an era, one that spawned warriors of this caliber, that Japan plunged in the mid-15th century, entering one of the darkest and bloodiest periods of its history. The imperial court remained confined to Kyoto. The shogunate continued to exist only in name, but true power had utterly disintegrated. The centralized state was paralyzed, and the country fractured into hundreds of feudal domains, each locked in a desperate struggle for survival and dominance. Thus, centuries-old foundations crumbled to dust, and upon their ruins, a brutal game began, where the price of losing was singular: absolute oblivion. This protracted and brutal historical phase is recorded in the annals as the Sengoku Jidai, meaning the age of warring states. Each region of the country was under the dominion of its daimyo. an independent military ruler who relied on a personal army, their own administrative apparatus, and a network of impregnable fortresses. In this chaos, alliances between clans were fleeting, forged only for immediate objectives, and loyalty became a negotiable currency, liable to change owners after every battle. Under such conditions, the samurai transformed from a simple warrior into a multifaceted figure, a strategist, diplomat, and architect of complex political intrigues. War became their true profession. Impeccable weapon mastery, the art of constructing fortifications, the ability to hire allies, to bribe, to instill fear, and to predict enemy actions all became an indispensable part of the military elite's arsenal. The first to fully grasp the revolutionary potential of widespread firearm use was Oda Nobunaga. He unhesitatingly shattered centuries-old canons of military ethics, broke down ancient clan barriers, and restructured his army on entirely new principles. Nobunaga mercilessly demolished mighty monastic fortresses that had been independent centers of power for centuries, reformed the system of governance, and methodically crushed all resistance, regardless of tradition or the past. His actions, highly controversial and often terrifying, laid the foundation for a new world, completely dismantling the familiar order of feudal conventions. He fell by the hand of one of his closest generals, but he had succeeded in initiating an irreversible process of change. After his death, power passed to Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a man of humble origins who managed to rise from the very bottom, starting his service as a simple foot soldier, ultimately becoming the absolute ruler of all Japan. His reforms aimed at total control. He conducted a comprehensive land survey, reorganized the tax system, and streamlined the social structure, clearly separating warriors from peasants and legally prohibiting movement between social classes. His army, numbering hundreds of thousands, became an instrument for realizing ambitious plans. He undertook 2 large-scale invasions of the Korean peninsula, seeking to expand Japan's influence on the continent. Yet these campaigns never achieved lasting success. Meanwhile, the samurai way of life itself increasingly adhered to a new, harsh principle: efficiency. Honor was now measured not by the nobility of actions, but by concrete results. Warriors forged complex alliances, ruthlessly sacrificed yesterday's allies, and arranged dynastic marriages solely to strengthen their own positions. Espionage, bribery, interception of correspondence, and political assassinations became commonplace tools of strategic struggle. Large-scale field battles combined with targeted diversionary strikes, military campaigns could last for weeks, but the outcome of an entire campaign could be decided by a single volley of arquebuses. Firearms, though never entirely displacing the legendary sword, forever altered tactics and the very course of war. The Sengoku era spawned countless figures, from noble heroes to treacherous villains, from triumphant victors to fallen victims. But behind all these personal dramas lay the power of systemic thinking, as the samurai learned to think on the scale of the entire nation. The decisive defeat of opposition forces in the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, achieved by Tokugawa Ieyasu, marked the definitive end of the Warring States period. This victory paved the way for the creation of a new governmental structure based on strict hierarchy and total control. Just 3 years later, Ieyasu received the title of shogun from the emperor and established the military government in Edo, a city destined to become Japan's new political and cultural center and to lend its name to an entire era that lasted for more than 2.5 centuries. The new order established by the shogunate rested upon a meticulously crafted system of subservience. Each daimyo received official confirmation of their status from the central authority, was assigned specific domains, and bore full responsibility for maintaining order within their lands. Furthermore, their position in this new hierarchy was determined not only by noble lineage, but also by their specific annual income, measured in koku of rice. Thus, From the ashes of an old world ruled by the sword and betrayal, an unshakable wall of new order was erected, designed to end chaos once and for all. Key political decisions emanated exclusively from Edo, and any opportunity to participate in state governance was inextricably linked to demonstrating unconditional loyalty to the shogun. To curb the growing power of feudal lords within their domains, the central government implemented the Sankin Kotai system, a mechanism of alternating attendance duties, brilliant in its simplicity and brutality. Each daimyo was required to spend a significant portion of the year in the capital, maintaining a luxurious residence at their own expense and serving at the supreme ruler's court. Their family, in turn, permanently resided in Edo under the unceasing vigilance of the authorities. These measures transformed relatives, especially heirs, into honorable hostages, serving as a guarantee of the clan head's loyalty. Additionally, the constant and costly movements of numerous entourages from the provinces to the capital and back drained the clan's treasuries, depriving them of the financial resources needed to prepare any armed rebellion. Absolutely everything was subject to control: travel routes, duration of visits to the capital, and the numerical composition and rank of accompanying persons. Every samurai in a daimyo's retinue knew their precise role and place within this complex system. In this way, the warrior class, once associated with battlefields, transformed into the bedrock of the administrative machine. Samurai held key posts in castle and city administrations, where they oversaw the enforcement of decrees, audited reports, and maintained public order, ensuring the stable functioning of the state at all levels. Their compensation was calculated in rice, and their rank and status directly determined the scope of their assigned duties. Position within this hierarchy was passed from father to son, and every young member of the class was prepared for future service from an early age. The entire way of life for a samurai was strictly regulated by their clan's rules and the internal regulations of the castle town. Samurai quarters, built adjacent to administrative centers, were models of rigorous planning and order. Life in these districts adhered to internal statutes with the same meticulous precision as carrying out official duties. The home, family, and public demeanor, everything conformed to established norms. Within each clan, ancestral archives were carefully preserved, and every warrior was the guardian not only of their duty, but also of their lineage's memory, fostering a powerful sense of continuity and corporate solidarity. Record-keeping, official correspondence, and reporting were conducted in strictly prescribed forms. External appearance, manner of speech, and on-duty behavior unmistakably indicated a person's place in the complex hierarchical system. The samurai was the local representative of authority. Shogunate decrees passed through their hands. They organized the collection of information for the center and compiled reports. In this era of long peace, it was the samurai, the former warrior, who became the guarantor of state power, whose primary task was to maintain an unbreakable structure and ensure the continuity of governance. This system allowed Japan to experience peace and stability for 2.5 centuries. By the early decades of the 18th century, the Tokugawa shogunate's structure had reached its zenith. The shogunate's power was absolute, its administrative apparatus worked like clockwork, and the social hierarchy seemed monolithic and unshakable. Yet, against this backdrop of outward prosperity, a drama unfolded that shook all of Japanese society and became a legend, a true anthem of loyalty, honor, and the undying spirit of Bushido. This story, known as The Revenge of the 47 Ronin, unfolded in the very heart of Edo. A Ronin was a samurai who had lost his lord due to the lord's death, disgrace, or the confiscation of his domain. Such a man, though formally retaining his warrior status, sword, and noble lineage, was in reality torn from the social fabric. He lost his stipend and official position, which, for a samurai culture built on service, was tantamount to social death and a loss of face. The Ronin's fate was a precarious existence, caught in a liminal space between duty and exile, between a glorious past and ignominious oblivion. In the year 1701, a daimyo named Asano Naganori arrived in the capital to perform ritual duties on behalf of his domain. A high-ranking court official, Kira Yoshinaka, was appointed as his instructor and ceremonial supervisor. Their relationship soured from the start. According to contemporary accounts, Kira's behavior was full of arrogance and perceived as a series of deliberate insults and humiliations. One day, unable to endure the provocations, Asano drew his short sword and struck Kira right within the shogun's palace walls. An assault within the sacred confines of the ruler's residence was the gravest of crimes. The reaction was immediate. Asano Naganori received an order to commit seppuku. The sentence was passed, and with its execution, the story could have ended, becoming merely a minor entry in the palace chronicles. But the Lord's death was not the finale, but merely the prologue to a drama that would forever change the understanding of samurai duty. Following their Lord's execution, his domain was mercilessly confiscated, and the Asano clan itself was disbanded. In an instant, hundreds of his loyal vassals became ronin, men without a master or a future. However, disarray and despair did not break their spirit. The reins of leadership of the former retainer band were taken up by the clan's senior counselor, the wise and resolute Oishi Kuranosuke. He did not allow his men to scatter in search of new service or fade into obscurity. Instead, they began methodical and clandestine preparations for retribution. This revenge was prepared not on a battlefield, but during peacetime, under the vigilant and suspicious oversight of the all-powerful shogunate administration, which required the utmost mastery of clandestine operations. Some of the former warriors took jobs in merchant shops and artisan workshops. Others hid under assumed names, while some masterfully feigned a life of idle debauchery, having seemingly lost all interest in their warrior's duty. Oishi himself moved to Kyoto, where he conspicuously led a dissolute lifestyle to lull the spies into a false sense of security and sow doubt about the seriousness of his intentions. In reality, every single one of their steps was part of a meticulously orchestrated plan. For nearly 2 years, the former warriors meticulously studied the layout of Kira's estate, covertly gathered weapons, and scouted the approaches to their enemy's residence. The assault took place on a cold December night in the year 1703. The warriors split into 2 detachments. One assaulted the main gate, while the second infiltrated the estate from the back entrance. The guards were neutralized with lightning speed. Kira himself, overcome with terror, was hiding in one of the storerooms. He was dragged into the courtyard, and justice was swiftly exacted upon him, beheaded on the very spot where he had humiliated their lord. Afterward, Oishi Kuranosuke, as the senior leader, raised their enemy's head and led his band to Sengaku-ji Temple. There, at the grave of Lord Asano, they made an offering to his spirit. Under shogunate law, an armed assault and act of vigilantism within the capital's confines were deemed the gravest of offenses. Yet the Ronin made no attempt to conceal their actions. Having fulfilled their duty, they calmly presented themselves to the authorities and surrendered. This incident sparked an unprecedented uproar throughout society, becoming the subject of impassioned debate at every level of government. The legal deliberations stretched on for a considerable period. From a formal legal standpoint, they were undeniably criminals who had flouted the law. Yet, through the lens of the Bushido Code of Honor, they had performed the ultimate act of loyalty. Ultimately, a compromise was reached. They were granted the privilege of committing seppuku, befitting true samurai. This verdict underscored that while the state upheld its authority and maintained order, it dared not deny the profound ideals of honor and duty. All 47 warriors were laid to rest in the same Sengaku-ji temple alongside their lord, transforming the site into a hallowed shrine and an enduring symbol of unyielding devotion. The saga of their heroic deed resonated throughout the land, inspiring playwrights to craft compelling dramas, poets to pen poignant ballads, and artists to engrave intricate series of prints. The name of each of the 47 participants became etched into legend. Their act was celebrated as the living embodiment of an ancient ideal: unwavering loyalty to the very end, devotion to one's lord even beyond death, and the fulfillment of duty as the paramount meaning of life itself. This singular event marked one of the last great samurai deeds during an era of peace, a brilliant flash against the backdrop of a fading warrior culture. Soon after, such tales faded from the chronicles, yet their memory remained indelibly etched into the nation's cultural fabric. By the latter half of the 19th century, Japan stood on the precipice of profound transformation. The system established by the Tokugawa shogunate, while having provided internal stability for centuries, was increasingly lagging behind a rapidly modernizing world. In 1853, a squadron of American warships, commanded by Commodore Matthew Perry, entered Japanese waters. Their arrival delivered an ominous signal. The era of national isolation had irrevocably ended. Under the undeniable pressure of gunboat diplomacy, the shogunate was compelled to open its ports to international trade. This momentous step ignited a profound internal crisis, which slowly began to erode centuries of established traditions and institutions. Contact with the West brought more than just novel goods and cutting-edge technologies into the country. Alongside these, however, seeped in new ideas, political doctrines, and blueprints for a modern nation-state. Steam engines, rifled firearms, sophisticated printing presses, and standardized military uniforms made an astonishing impression. Compared to formidable European armies, Japan's military structure appeared archaic and fragmented. Progressive clans, notably Satsuma and Choshu, began to brace for the inevitable reforms, procuring rifles and artillery from abroad and training their forces along Western lines. Discontent with the shogunate's policies steadily escalated. In 1868, young reformers from the southern clans declared the restoration of direct imperial rule. The Meiji Restoration brought an end to centuries of military governance, with the last shogun voluntarily stepping down. Authority shifted into the hands of a new government, where key roles were assumed by the very samurai reformers who had been the first to grasp the urgent need for change. Thus began a new epoch, one in which ancient ideals would collide with the harsh realities of an industrializing world, leaving it utterly uncertain if the spirit of Bushido could find a place in this rapidly transforming Japan. With the advent of the new government, an unprecedented restructuring of the nation's administrative, military, and social life commenced. The samurai, who for centuries had served as the very backbone of power, were abruptly stripped of their privileged status overnight. Their hereditary rice stipends were abolished, and the long-standing, rigidly stratified class system was replaced by a unified national civil service open to all citizens. The new imperial army was now formed based on universal conscription, regardless of a recruit's origins. The sword, once a sacred symbol of status and an indispensable attribute of power, lost its significance, and its public wearing was legally prohibited. Thus, the visible image of centuries of service vanished from the streets of Japanese cities. The transformations, like an unstoppable avalanche, impacted every single aspect of life. The old system of feudal domains was abolished, replaced by a network of prefectures. The governance of the country became strictly centralized, directly accountable to the imperial court. The capital was relocated from ancient Kyoto to Edo, which was given a new name, Tokyo, meaning Eastern Capital. Concurrently, a rapid modernization of industry, the education system, and the armed forces unfolded. Japan desperately strove to catch up with and surpass the Western powers, which just yesterday had dictated their terms on the international stage. For countless samurai, these changes signaled the collapse of their entire world. Those who had served for centuries in castles, commanded garrisons, maintained order, or kept meticulous ledgers suddenly found themselves cast adrift, deprived of their accustomed work and status. In urban centers, many managed to adapt, transitioning into civil service roles as teachers, bureaucrats, or managers in new enterprises. However, in the provinces, where generations had lived within an insular clan system, the new model of governance was perceived as a profound loss of roots, a betrayal of fundamental principles. When the Meiji-era reforms were definitively established, the samurai lost everything: their right to wear swords, their exclusive right to military service, and their very class definition. In some regions, this was perceived as the opening of new horizons. In others, however, it was viewed as an abandonment of honor and dignity. This feeling was particularly acute in the Satsuma domain on the southern island of Kyushu, where warrior traditions were preserved with exceptional tenacity, and the memory of service was considered the highest form of human existence. It was here, in the south, that the last desperate attempt to halt the country's relentless march towards a new world order was destined to be born. Saigo Takamori was not merely an outstanding general. He was one of the founding fathers of the new Japan, a pivotal figure in the Meiji Restoration, the man who had led the imperial forces to victory in the Civil War. His authority among the people and among warriors was colossal. Saigo was characterized by his unimpeachable honesty, directness, and profound respect for ancestral traditions. After the victory, he took a high position in the new government, but soon left it, having diverged in views from his colleagues. The course towards total westernization seemed to him disastrous. He saw in it a threat to the nation's moral foundations, a weakening of the national spirit, and the dissolution of the true samurai essence into a faceless bureaucratic machine. Upon resigning, Saigo returned to his native Kagoshima. There, he founded private military academies for former samurai, where young people were taught swordsmanship, archery, horsemanship, and classical tactics. The students lived by a strict code, their daily lives imbued with a discipline reminiscent of the glorious times of the old clans. From across the nation, these schools became a magnet for those who rejected the reforms. People forged in a world of duty, who safeguarded ancestral blades and simply yearned for a reason to draw them once more. By the spring of 1877, the relationship between the government in Tokyo and Saigo's academies had reached a boiling point. The central authorities began to suspect that, under the guise of these schools, the last samurai was meticulously orchestrating a full-scale rebellion. Each side viewed the other as an existential threat to Japan's future. The clash between the old and the new, tradition and progress, seemed to have reached its inevitable crescendo, and the nation held its breath, poised for explosion. The government's attempt to disarm the samurai proved to be the very spark that ignited the flames of rebellion. The students of the private military academy were the first to rise in defense of their rights and honor, their fervor swiftly engulfing the entire province of Satsuma. Faced with the inexorable tide of events, Saigo Takamori accepted the mantle of leadership, spearheading a desperate march on Tokyo, a campaign destined to determine the fate of old Japan. Northward marched an army whose primary weapon was not an outdated arsenal, but an unyielding faith in the sanctity of the warrior's code and the imperative to reclaim lost honor. Standing against them was an entirely different force, the new model Imperial Army. Organized along Western lines, it boasted centralized command, access to modern weaponry, and a meticulously honed logistical system. The collision of these two worlds ignited a series of bloody battles across the island of Kyushu. The Satsuma warriors displayed astonishing feats of valor, yet their courage could not offset the immense disparity in firepower and human resources. The rebels clung to every defensive line, but the methodical superiority of the government forces inexorably took its toll. One after another, cities and fortresses fell under the control of imperial troops. By the end of summer, a dwindling handful of surviving rebels had been pushed back to their starting point, the city of Kagoshima, where they found themselves completely encircled. In September, the final desperate assault occurred, during which Saigo Takamori sustained a mortal wound. Legend holds that, bleeding profusely, he turned to a loyal comrade, asking for assistance to preserve his honor, and then performed the ritual suicide, seppuku, as was befitting a true warrior. The death of their leader instantly shattered the spirit of resistance. His body was interred with full military honors. The battle standard was lowered over his grave, and his faithful sword laid to rest beside his remains. The surviving warriors laid down their arms. Thus concluded the warrior class's last organized attempt to defend their world. Remarkably, the imperial government chose not to besmirch the memory of its chief adversary. On the contrary, decades later, Saigo's figure was fully rehabilitated and elevated to the status of a national treasure. A monument was erected in his honor, and his name forever etched into the pantheon of Japan's greatest heroes. Saigo Takamori transformed into an enduring symbol of fidelity to one's convictions, even when the nation's developmental trajectory clashed irreconcilably with them. His rebellion did not alter the course the country had chosen, but it became a poignant requiem for a fading epoch, a time when human life was wholly defined by duty, and death on the battlefield was the ultimate expression of purpose. The suppression of the Satsuma Rebellion marked a definitive line, beyond which there was no turning back to the past. Universal conscription was instituted across the nation. European legal codes were implemented, civilian schools opened their doors, a unified national currency emerged, and a network of railways began to snake across the land. From the remnants of feudal fragmentation, a formidable centralized state arose, cemented by imperial ideology. The samurai class, as a political and military force, definitively exited the stage of history. Their meticulously crafted armor became museum pieces, their swords treasured family heirlooms, and their very essence an enduring legacy in chronicles, art, and popular lore. The warrior did not vanish without a trace. He honorably completed his centuries-long journey, becoming an indelible part of the nation's soul. The blade was forever sheathed, yet a question lingered. Would the warrior's spirit, cast aside by a new era, one day be called upon once more by destiny?